Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, Bobby Jindal's ambition to be president has never been a secret. Nevertheless, he made his plans official this week. And if there is to be a statue of President Jindal one day, there might be some spaces available in New Orleans. We'll look at these stories tonight, as well as the murder of a New Orleans police officer, a strong critique of DWI investigations, an historic ruling on same-sex marriages, and Jefferson Parish planning for the future. And in our plans are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Jonathan Bullington, reporter, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Stephanie Grace, columnist, the New Orleans Advocate. And Stephanie, over to you. I mean, big news today, the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage. What did they rule?
They ruled that it's a go all across the country, including states like Louisiana that have bans in place. It still is in place as of today. So they could have gone, this was really expected given kind of every signal the court had sent. It was a little surprising given that the court itself seemed very divided and kind of angry. It was a 5-4 decision. Justice Roberts was on the losing side of it. You know, he was on the winning side of the healthcare decision yesterday, which somehow, even though it was Obamacare, seemed a little less contentious. So that's it. So the court basically said it's the law of the land under the Constitution's equal protection and due process clauses. You cannot deny marriage rights to same-sex couples. So that means, you know, they could have taken an in-between position. They could have said states like Louisiana have to recognize marriages performed legally in other states, but not necessarily perform them here. They went all the way. So here we are today. Yeah. Marriage is supposed to be legal in the state. Nobody got married. And that's because the clerks of court around the state, and actually in New Orleans, it's not the clerk of court, it's the Marriage Bureau, which is part of the state Department of Health and Hospitals, are not willing to issue licenses yet. They're saying, we're waiting to see. There could be, you know, somebody could ask for a rehearing. We don't have clarity yet. One of the issues is that, unlike most other states, we've talked about this a lot on the show, the district judge, Martin Feldman, decided against same-sex marriage. So there isn't kind of a ruling in place that allows for same-sex marriage. So they've asked the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal to basically order him to look at what the Supreme Court did and declare it legal, but that has not happened yet.
And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal had not ruled yet. They were awaiting the Supreme Court, the state.
Correct. They had a hearing,
but
then immediately after the hearing, we found out the court was going to rule, so they kind of stepped aside.
So the clerks of court, the state clerks of court, basically, I think they're issuing an advisory, was it, to other clerks around the state just to wait for a while?
Yes, the kind of association of clerks of court, and to basically say 25 days is what they're saying, which seems like a very long time. That may not hold. In New Orleans, there was a couple that showed up first thing this morning and said, we'd like to get married, and basically we'd like to get married before Bobby Jindal can stop us, actually. Jindal, I should say, was the first of the many, many Republican candidates to come out critiquing the ruling. They all followed him, but he got in there first. So
yeah, he really, really blasted the ruling, and he said something that was rather interesting in his speech in New Hampshire?
He's Iowa, I think.
Iowa it was?
He's been to both.
Yeah, that's right. He was in Iowa, yeah.
But he said something about, you know, if they're going to disregard the Constitution, why don't we just save some money and get rid of the court?
That's quite a statement,
isn't
it?
I mean, it was, I think, an attempt at a joke, but not a very good one.
No.
But there was a range of opinion. You know, from the one side, Mike Huckabee said the ruling's really illegitimate. He said
from the U.S. Supreme Court.
That's what he said.
Justice Scalia said the ruling's kind of illegitimate too.
In the very strongly worded minority.
The dissenting justices had some very
harsh things to say
about the ruling, and said we're in favor of marriage for whomever, but not achieving
it
this. Right? He said, I don't really care.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect me. It's not my issue.
Yeah.
My issue is how the Constitution sets up the rights of the states and the states to vote on their own.
And again, states' rights, that's the phrase a lot of them are using, because there were these public referenda years ago. They might not come out the same way. You know, the argument, it's kind of like, you know, should it be done through the popular vote or should it be done through the courts? And, you know, I think you have to look at history and say things like Brown versus Formative Education. You know, we've had some very major policy decisions that have come from the court. This is not unprecedented, but so Jindal put out a statement. You know, a few of them, Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, kind of said we should respect everyone's positions, and certainly there are people doing this out of love. Bobby Jindal did not say a word about the couples who would possibly be getting married. It was all about religious freedom and how he was going to make sure that nobody had to bake cakes and fried flowers and everything for a same-sex couple.
Marriage licenses to same-sex couples were not issued today
They
on
were
this day of
not
the Supreme
issued.
Court
There
ruling.
was,
What is anticipated in terms of what the state of Louisiana perhaps would do?
Well,
what the
certainly
governor
the
would do?
state's in no rush to do this. The politicians kind of uniformly, the state politicians, including the Attorney General, Buddy Caldwell, who is running for re-election, and trying to, against somebody even more conservative than he is, they are in no rush to do this. Mitch Landrieu, of course, issued a statement saying he was very excited for this, congratulating this first couple that wanted to get married. The Convention and Visitors Bureau immediately started putting out promotional materials for New Orleans.
What's the normal wait time? I got married too long ago to remember, but you have to wait for a license in Louisiana
not
anywhere.
anymore.
Not anymore.
It
okay,
turns
you
out
did
because
when I got married.
Remember a few years ago they tried to do this Vegas wedding chapel kind of thing? So it's 3 days, but that can be waived by a judge. Now in New Orleans, there were judges who were ready to waive these things, we're told. But these couples who went to the marriage bureau and kind of waited out all day were eventually told that they would not get a marriage license, and they were very disappointed, obviously.
So really, we don't really know at this point when marriage licenses will begin to be issued. Will it be a month? Will it be 4 days, 5 days, a week?
We don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on what the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal does, and we don't know that yet.
Okay, interesting.
So stay tuned. However, there is a big rally planned for tonight. There certainly will be celebrations.
Where is this rally?
Jackson Square.
Okay, what time is that going to be?
I think it's 5:30 or so it's probably happening right now.
It's over. It's done.
And then the celebration's supposed to move to Bourbon Street, where I suspect it will go quite late.
I suspect it'll be a big celebration.
Yes.
All right, Stephanie, thanks a lot. Over to Jonathan now. Jonathan, you covered a really tragic event that happened in the city last week, the murder of a New Orleans police officer.
Yes, this was early Saturday morning, right? Officer Errol Holloway, 22-year veteran of the department, 5th District was his last assignment. And it has been rough for the department, for the city, obviously his family and friends and everyone.
Yeah.
I know there's a memorial service was this afternoon, and then tomorrow, Saturday, starts the mass, the procession, burial, everything.
Now, he was killed allegedly by a prisoner that he was transporting. Can you describe what allegedly happened?
Well, there's still plenty of unanswered questions. What has been said thus far is that he was transporting a arrested individual to central lockup. Police have identified that suspect as Travis Boyes, and somehow, and this is one of the big questions here, a .40 caliber gun was in the back of that car, and Boyes managed to get his hands on it, according to police, and he fired the fatal shot. Again, the Public Integrity Bureau is investigating, and I don't know when that will be finished, but at some point they will release the results of the investigation, and we'll know more about what exactly happened inside that squad car early that morning.
Now, from earlier discussion, you were telling me that you've been told that sometimes someone will be arrested, they'll be in the back of a police car, they may be carrying a weapon, and they don't want to be
Well, I mean, obviously,
convicted with that.
so when you hear about this, right, you think, how is this possible? You assume that when someone's arrested and put in the back of a squad car that they've been searched and that everything is going to be fine here from point A to point B. Folks I've talked to say that it is not entirely uncommon that not just here in New Orleans, but across the country, law enforcement, that someone will be searched and a weapon will be missed in that search. It is possible that somebody had that weapon and put it in the back of the car before Officer Holloway ever entered.
Because Officer Holloway was not the arresting officer.
He was not,
The suspect
no.
had
Someone
been arrested.
else had arrested him. Officer Holloway was merely transporting him to central lockup. Procedure says Boyes should have been searched twice, both by the arresting officer and then in transport. So it really, it's a big mystery.
So do we know, was the same vehicle used for the arrest and for the transport? Or
I don't believe so, no. I think it was a different vehicle for the arrest as for the transfer, is my understanding. But,
And was the suspect actually held at the 5th District Station? He had been brought into?
He was brought into the station and then was being transported from station to central lockup.
So could this have been a gun that was left over from a previous arrest of somebody else?
It might have been,
carrying the
yeah.
car?
I talked to a law enforcement expert out on the West Coast who said in his time as an officer, he had gotten his squad car for the day, looked in the back seat and saw drugs, weapons, things like that in the back seat that were dumped by whoever was last in there. Again, best practices say you're supposed to search that squad car before you enter.
No, a weapon had been found on the suspect upon his arrest.
38 caliber. This was found and was in the front seat, and Officer Holloway was transporting that weapon to evidence.
But that was
not the one used, according to police.
And there's still the question, though, he was handcuffed with the handcuffs behind his back. So how did he do that?
Double jointed, I'm not sure, but he managed to get those cuffs from back to front.
And then eventually off before he was ultimately
well,
picked up, or did we know?
When he was picked up, he had the handcuffs were busted, but my understanding is they were still around his wrist. And when you look at this surveillance footage from inside St. Claude gas station where he was spotted, he has a long jacket on, and the sleeves are here, and the clerk. That certainly raised his suspicion. Hot summer day here in New Orleans, and here comes a guy walking in with a jacket.
So I would guess police procedure is being reviewed on this as well.
Yeah, the Public Integrity Bureau is reviewing. The Independent Police Monitor, her office is also reviewing to see what, if anything, can be done in the future to prevent this. All
right, Jonathan, very tragic situation. Certainly our sympathies to the family, to NOPD. Over to Dawn now, Future Watch. Jefferson Parish has some plans for the future. Let's hear about them.
It's called Jefferson Edge, and the Edge is basically the roadmap for Jefferson's future. It was created in 2000 for the Edge 2020, and it's a master plan that's updated every 5 years. So they're going through the update right now. JEDCO, the Jefferson Parish Economic Development folks, work in tandem with politicians, stakeholders, civic groups to kind of facilitate this whole plan and then actually get it approved by the parish government as the official map for the future. And what they're looking at in this 5-year update is business and industry clusters, areas where they can focus on for redevelopment in the parish. And they say they have some prime places to look at, one of which is Jefferson Highway, the Jefferson Highway corridor, where there are a lot of vacant businesses, old businesses that have not been upgraded, everything kind of upriver from Ochsner Hospital. That's one area they will focus on. Another area is around the airport. 2018 is supposed to bring that whole new airport terminal, so the old terminal will be left to be redeveloped into something. It's right there by the river, by rail access, so they say maybe it will be a good spot for a multimodal transportation hub for the region. That's one way they'll look at it.
So on the East Bank, Airline Highway,
Airline Drive,
okay. It is still pretty much, I mean, that's mainly what's left to be developed on the East Bank now. Otherwise, the East Bank is pretty well developed.
The East Bank is pretty well developed. The focus has been a lot on the West Bank with the new technology park, with the motorsports center, with the new schools, and there is still plenty of room for development on the West Bank. But a lot of the focus overall in Jefferson Parish and with this Edge, the last couple of updates have focused a lot on quality of life issues in the parish that were brought about after Hurricane Katrina, after people traveled away and then came back. Things like national chains and stores and creature comforts, as well as beautification and schools. And you see evidence of that kind of all over Jefferson Parish now, where it hadn't been before. As you travel along Veterans Highway, as you travel along Clearview in the Elmwood area, there has been a whole lot of development. So now it's more looking at transportation, looking at workforce, looking at areas that are ripe for development for burgeoning industries. There is a huge section of food manufacturing businesses that is housed in Jefferson Parish. Paul Prudhomme's Magic Seasonings, Cajun Kettle Foods, Big Easy Blends, Zatarans, Mr. Mudbugs, and more. So there's this whole industry that they look to continue to support, as well as making sure that the roadways can get people to and from without too much traffic and congestion. And another area of development, I'm told, is really destination medicine, people coming in from outside of Louisiana and even outside of the United States to seek medical care at Louisiana hospitals, namely Ostrom and East Jefferson and West Jefferson. For some of the, Ostrom's is the top liver transplant hospital in the country right now. There's some cancer treatment that's going on and some brain treatment that's going on in some of our hospitals that there's really room for more around.
We have to note that the Theater for Performing Arts in Jefferson
has finally opened, over budget and very late, but there's room for development in that whole area along Airline Drive as well, near Zephyr Stadium and the Saints facility and with the Performing Arts facility, businesses that pop up around them. And the idea is to have a plan in place to make smart growth happen.
I remember when Zephyr Stadium opened, they were really hoping that you would get restaurants and things around there, and it
has not taken off.
Yeah,
so.
maybe
well, they're hoping now with the Performing Arts Center that will pop up.
Yeah.
Okay, over to Errol. There's been some discussion now about some of our monuments in town.
Yeah, this is one of these issues that makes a lot of people uneasy because it walks the edge of having racial implications, and there are some people who just don't like when street names and school names and statues are changed, having nothing to do with race or nothing to do with slavery. It's just because it's what they're used to. It's been part of their city, and it's been part of their life. So anytime there's these proposals for changes, there's sort of this twinge. I kind of like the spirit of Councilman Jason Williams, as you mentioned, who actually essentially says that things on a case-by-case basis. A
community discussion.
Yeah, let's have a community discussion about it, rather than a mayor just saying this, and this. And that discussion hasn't begun, and there's no one law governing these. I mean, some of these were private monuments that were put up by private organizations, so everyone may have a different solution. Just on the top of my head, though, it seems to me that people like Jefferson Davis and maybe Beauregard will be tougher to defend. There was nothing really sterling about Davis's record as president of the Confederacy, other than he died in New Orleans. Beauregard was from New Orleans, and actually his real claim to fame is that he was the first president of the Louisiana Lottery. So maybe if you put like a scratch ticket with him. There is an argument, though, for Robert E. Lee. And when I hear these things talk, that's the one that kind of just grates at me, because Robert E. Lee wasn't about slavery, he was about Virginia. And this was at a time when, he was offered the command of the Union Army. And he says, well, no, I'm from Virginia, I'm a Virginian. Robert E. Lee could have very easily wound up being president after Lincoln. And when the war was over, a lot of people don't know this, he spent a lot of time trying to rebuild the South and urging the Union soldiers, go back home, go back to your farms, go back to your families, because you had a situation where you had all these young men who knew nothing but war, knew nothing but violence, and the South could have really turned into guerrilla warfare. It could have been like what happened in Iraq over the years, where you had all these factions that started, and he was the champion of really trying to unite the South and getting the South back. He took a beating for it. I mean, if you've been to Washington and you see the Lee Plantation, it's now Arlington. But he's the person. I hope there's at least some discussion, or at least some debate on it. I hope for all of these there's some genuine debate. I will say that there are a lot of generals that get things named after them. Okay, and it would be, and I would be fully supportive of different types of people in life. I was thinking the other day that in my lifetime, my principal residence has been 4 different streets, and 3 of them were named after generals, and so I understand. And not all of them were really sterling generals. But I do think a case could be made for Lee.
Right, and of course this conversation follows some communities and states taking down the Confederate flag, that, for instance, in South Carolina, and this, of course, was following the murders of 9 people in the South Carolina Charleston
And here
Church.
Louisiana is blessed, because every time this Confederate flag issue comes up, Our
Got a pelican on ours.
Not only a pelican, our flag is motherhood. Okay, it's a mother with 3 chicks. You can't get more wholesome than that. So at least our forefathers did a good job with that.
All right, Errol. Thanks a lot. Okay, Stephanie.
Yes.
It's official. He's running for president.
Are we surprised?
Oh, no.
Okay. It was funny. They released, obviously, Governor Jindal announced that he's running for president Wednesday afternoon. His campaign put a video up online a few hours before that was really the announcement. And it was, I think they were hoping it would go viral. It did go viral, but maybe for not the reasons they were hoping. It was featured on The Daily Show, for example,
Was it?
last night. It's very funny if anybody wants to look it up. Hidden video of Governor Jindal and his wife Supriya telling their children, and their response was kind of, yeah, we know.
I haven't seen it yet. I
So-
definitely need to go take
Yeah.
a look at it. Yeah, I've read
Look, there's a
comments. that
turtle.
Some people
It's-
thought it was kind of creepy. As the way-
Creepy, the word, if you Google Jindal and creepy, you will get a lot of hits.
Really,
Yes.
for that. So it didn't
For that.
quite work out the way
No.
perhaps the campaign had
I think
planned.
so.
But what did the campaign, and in his speech when he announced that he's
then he had
running,
the
what
official
did he say he's going to
announcement.
do? How can he set himself apart?
Okay. It was the same issues he's been talking about. It was probably a good speech for his purposes, which is to establish himself as kind of a very conservative figure. He talked about the things he talks about in general, religious liberty and things like that. He really tried to position himself as kind of an outsider, an insurgent. And the one other candidate he named was Jeb Bush, of course, who is the ultimate establishment candidate. Now, we all know Bobby Jindal has been in government pretty much since he was 24, so that's maybe a little bit of a hard sell, but that's what they're going for. Obviously, their numbers are very low. They look and say, look, everyone has 10% or so or less. Nobody's at 30%. Everybody will peak at some point. Yeah, they're talking with confidence.
Well, he says that he is a doer.
He is a doer. That was
Not
the
a
other big
talker, yeah.
line, that he is a doer, not a talker, which I think was meant to contrast him with President Obama, but also with some of the senators who are running against him. They're very much focused on his record. Now, of course, people here would say that's a little problematic, given that he has a 32% approval rating in Louisiana.
Yeah.
One thing that was interesting was he had the event at the Pontchartrain Center in Kenner. I did not see a Jefferson Parish politician there. There
Really?
may have been one or two that I didn't see, but no big-name politicians in the state. A smattering of legislators, a couple from St. Tammany Parish. New Orleans, Ron Foreman, who is his Superdome Committee chairman. That's pretty much it. I mean, it's interesting. Normally, I think you have your people behind you, and he had a full house, but not the political establishment here, certainly.
Yeah, Errol?
First, I would say I think anybody who gets to the level where they're a presidential candidate is a doer.
Yeah.
You don't become a presidential candidate by just being passive. But look, if you as a journalist wanted to interview the main person, like the brains behind the Jindal campaign, and I'm not talking about the press secretary,
Okay.
but like the
Timmy
driving
Teeple.
force, who would you try to contact?
It is Timmy Teeple, who has been with him since he was not his first campaign for governor, but since he went to Congress in 2005. He's a partner in a firm called On Message, and On Message, some of the guys are working for Jindal, some are working for the super PAC, so that's interesting because they're not supposed to coordinate, but it's the same firm. But Timmy Teeple was Bobby Jindal's chief of staff, and then he became a consultant, but he's really always been there, and nobody is closer. And he really is someone who came up through the Christian conservative movement. He's homeschooled. He's very much a true believer in those causes, and he really does have Jindal's ear and trust. So he's the campaign manager. He's not run a presidential campaign before.
So it's official. Our governor is off and running for the nomination of the GOP.
As little as we've been seeing him lately, we will be seeing him less. Yes.
Okay, Stephanie,
And
thanks
remember,
a
4
lot.
years ago, Buddy Roma ran, so this will be
He did.
2 elections
That's
in a
true.
row where we're
Exactly.
losing the governor.
So, okay, we'll see what sort of traction he gets. All
Yeah.
right. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Jonathan, our Orleans Inspector General, Ed Quatrevo, released a pretty scathing report about how
I would say.
DWIs have been handled for
DWI
years here.
case management, and really I was thinking about it just now. I can't think of few who escaped without some sort of chastising from his office. How police department investigates DWI cases and how they manage how the sheriff's office, how the city attorney's office, how folks in traffic court themselves, how they manage these cases. It was really kind of an all-around
criticism there.
Yes,
now,
that's
there were
one
also
word.
responses for each of these groups, but sort of
Sure.
the main criticism, a real major concern, was that multiple offenders were not being charged as multiple offenders because the information hadn't gotten through that they were.
Exactly. And of course, we should note that the city attorney's office and the traffic court folks and everyone has said that they have systems in place now because, the Inspector General's office, his staff, they reviewed, I think it was 2007 to 2012 was around that time range of cases. And in fact, the traffic court, in their response, one of the judges called the data stale and said, you should know that we have these new systems in place that hopefully will better track and prevent this kind of stuff from happening.
And also, the city already had said no pleas for. Are they doing a pilot project? Or
Yeah,
something
they
for
are,
no
and
pleas right
I
now?
don't know the current status of that pilot project. But again, it was it was pretty rough. The beating he gave to all of them. So.
Of course, the overarching issue is public safety, because certainly you don't, particularly for multiple offenders, DWI offenders, you don't want these folks out on the road.
Yes.
But also, it's an economic issue too.
Yeah, millions of dollars or something like that.
Yeah, that the city does not get because of fines and fees too that the offender would have to pay if found guilty. You embedded in your report, NOLA.com, a video.
The Inspector General sends out this report, and with it he has a video of him kind of going over what his findings and.
Okay, so people can find that at NOLA.com, right? And also on the Inspector General's
On his
website, I'm
website
sure
as
it's
well,
probably there too. Okay, thanks a lot. All right, folks, time to look ahead.
Well, yesterday, an airline out of Panama City, Panama, Copa Airlines, started 4 times a week nonstop flights between New Orleans and Panama City. You couple that with the good news about the return of the banana business to New Orleans, and then also the thawing of relationships between Cuba, and things are falling in place for New Orleans to become more of an international city with ties to South America. So, good news.
Right, good news. Jonathan.
I think of the anniversary of the Bourbon Street shooting is coming up, and we kind of took a look at all of the various things that have been done since that shooting, from the French Quarter Task Force, NOLA Patrol, Bourbon Street Promenade, to kind of beef up security in the quarter.
Okay, thanks. Don?
The draft copy of the updated Jefferson Edge will be out next month, so look out for that. And also in September, another major redevelopment look for parts of Jefferson Parish will be announced in September.
Right, great. Thanks. Steph.
For the second year in a row, Baton Rouge will be hosting the Miss USA pageant next month. Big deal for the city, a lot of publicity. We were talking about presidential politics. Of course, Donald Trump is the co-owner of that pageant, and Univision, the Spanish language network, was supposed to broadcast it, which is, again, a big deal for Baton Rouge. They've now pulled out because of what Donald Trump said about Mexicans in his announcement speech.
Okay, and we'll be interesting with him in the race, no doubt about
exactly.
it. Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks, Errol, for being here. Thank you all so much for joining us. And, of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.